Back in the spring of 2012, as has become his practice, Bishop O'Connell met with the priests of the diocese in their vicariates, basically their counties. And he hears every year from the priests about what's going on in the parishes and what is really of concern to them. Out of that conversation really came this notion of placing marriage as one of the pastoral priorities for the diocese and to begin to act upon that. The then Office of Family Life began some listening around the diocese, and I saw some of you as you were coming in today. Some of you attended marriage symposia around the diocese. There was one held in each county, about 100 people came together, and we really tried to dig in and to determine just what the experience of marriage was going on around the diocese in parishes. What were the struggles? What were the graces? And we tried to learn from that. Out of that process came a study commission, which was appointed October a year ago by the bishop. Those of you who are in the room who were part of that one-year study commission, could you stand for a moment, please? Thank you for all of your hard work. These are men and women who came together from each constituency of ministry around the diocese, both priests and deacons, campus ministers, school principals, both on the elementary and high school level, DREs, youth ministers, pre-Cana couples, and a lot of different people from the diocesan staff, as well as some consultation with those social workers and things who work for Catholic Charities with regard to marriage counseling, to sift all the information we collected during the symposia and begin to do some work in terms of making recommendations to the bishop for strengthening marriage in the diocese. Those recommendations were given to the bishop in October. After some reflection and consultation with the senior staff, Bishop has accepted those, and it's my pleasure to present them to you today as our plan, our action plan for strengthening marriage in the Diocese of Trenton. I'm big on metaphors. I'm a visual learner. Maybe you are too. And I'd like to lift before you the idea of a manufactured beam. I don't know if you can see it from where you're sitting, but many of our churches have these beams, and they're beams that are made up of layers of wood or layers of some kind of material. And together, these layers form one unit, and the beam is used to span long distances and to bear heavy loads. The construction of a beam like this adds strength, unusual stability, and a flexibility that's required to meet modern challenges. I would suggest to you that our plan for strengthening marriage is similarly made up of layers of initiatives that together will bring a strength to marriage in the diocese, that will create a stable foundation, and that will help to build in a resilience, a flexibility in our married couples that might be supported and nurtured really in our parish communities. So if you would keep in mind that idea of a layered beam, a manufactured beam. And I've tried to depict that for you. I'm going to talk about 7 initiatives or actions within that plan. They are equip, proclaim, influence, prepare, restore, encourage, and build. And you will find that in your resource book at the center of the book. Looks like this. I'm going to offer you some reflection on these 7 overviews, and I'm going to try to point out to you today where the workshops will help you to be imaginative about how to implement some of these. plans of action and strategies for success at your parish, at your school, in whatever ministry you are working. Some of these strategies certainly will not be exhaustive. I'm sure that you could imagine many others, and we want to encourage you to do that today as we kind of lay the plan out for you. We hope that you will share the best practices at your table, what's going on in your parishes that seems to be working well, so that others might benefit from it, and you might learn some things today that you could take home as well. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to articulate a reality for you, and then the response that we'd like to make in this plan. So for the first reality I'd like to talk about, we as the Marriage Commission came to the conclusion that we are struggling as a church to articulate the beautiful teachings about marriage that Bishop O'Connell shared with us this morning in a way that is positive and life-giving. We are operating in a society in which the norms have changed. We know that probably between 60 and 80% of the couples who come to the church for marriage have been cohabiting. The face of the family has changed. In the last census in New Jersey, the traditional family household now is only 50% of the population in New Jersey, 51%. The population is made up also of single-parent households. About 17 or 18% of the population is single-parent households. And at that same time, about 25% of the population in New Jersey are single people living by themselves. These numbers are very different than they were even a generation ago. You heard some reflection on divorce and remarriage. That has become commonplace even among Catholics. And you also heard the bishop reflect a little on the attempts to redefine marriage. We know that in 34 states of the Union, there is some recognition of a same-sex union using the word marriage as applied to it, and that case now is before the Supreme Court. We can find ourselves spending more time and energy talking about those things we oppose or don't believe in than what we do believe in. We find ourselves saying, no this, no that. But how much time are we spending saying yes? Yes to God's plan. Yes to God's plan for love and marriage, and standing for that in our society. So in light of this reality, we find two things happening in the religious ed classroom, in the parish office, wherever this is taking place. We have people with an incomplete understanding who may be uncomfortable speaking about these realities. We ourselves may have fallen short of this ideal, or we just may be unpracticed at speaking this truth with love. And so we avoid talking about these issues altogether. On the other side of the extreme, we might be sort of ignorant of the deficit in our own understanding. Maybe we're frustrated. We find ourselves with a lack of empathy. Perhaps we overlook the humble self-examination that's required in ministry, and we find now that our personal feelings or understandings, unchecked, have been used as a weapon of alienation. Two extremes, yes, somewhere on the continuum, most of us. But can we evolve a way of talking about the beauty of marriage, the importance of marriage, the encounter with Christ in marriage that will be life-giving for the world? So the first of our initiatives will be to equip Catholic clergy and lay ministers to be authentic teachers and witnesses to the truth and beauty of sacramental marriage. You know, you might be familiar with Paul VI saying about witnesses. He said, modern man pays attention or learns from witnesses. And if they learn from teachers, it's because they're witnesses. So it's very important, this concept of being able to have our pastoral action match what our teaching says. In this undertaking, the diocese will be making available some homily notes for preaching about marriage in a variety of settings. The diocese will offer some opportunities for training for the various constituencies. It will also develop some resources, especially those that could be useful in discussion of these things that have become controversial in our society. And we are hoping that parishes will offer some instruction to teachers and catechists annually on some aspect of strengthening marriage. My time serving in a parish, one of the things I learned was that people with questions don't always go to the office. People with questions talk to the first grade catechist, they talk to the parish secretary, they talk to everyone. And so it's very important that as many people as possible have the right answer, have a full and pastoral answer for those who have questions with regard to strengthening marriage. We hope that the parishes will invite and support teachers and catechists who are in irregular marriages. We know that that is the pastoral reality. And so it's not just about saying, no, you can't serve, but how can we journey together to help to regularize your marriage? Today, you'll be offered a few workshops, perhaps, that might connect with this topic. One is teaching the truth in love, and Deanna Sass has been pooling all of the research in this area. She's our director of pastoral care and a licensed family counselor, so you might find that helpful. Also, the vendors in the area, many of our exhibitors have lots of materials that can help you in making sure that what you're talking about is the authentic teaching of the church. The second reality that we came to was that attitudes about marriage are shaped by images, experiences, and teaching beginning in childhood. And so often when we start talking about marriage ministry, we immediately jump to pre-Cana. And you know and I know that the imagination, that the attitude and understanding of marriage has been shaped long before the engagement ring has been put on someone's finger. It has been said, in fact, that religious imagination is set by the age of 5. And so attitudes are shaped very early and then reinforced by people's experiences and the teaching of the church. What we have found is that in the religion curriculum, there is little opportunity, really, to teach and learn about marriage. You have to hunt for it. There is a fulsome lesson, really, in the 5th grade year when you're teaching on sacraments. But quite frankly, it's in the last third of the book, and not everybody gets to it. We also recognize that there's a growing gap between those Catholics who are baptized and those who make First Eucharist. And there's even a bigger gap between those Catholics who are baptized and make First Eucharist and are confirmed. Many, many fewer. The national average is about 84% right now. But if we were to remove the baby boomers from that statistic, you would find that that number is probably down in the 60 or 70% range. So not only do we not have the opportunity then to work with people in that critical adolescent time, but the reality is that after confirmation, few of them are engaged in any kind of formal learning unless they are enrolled in a Catholic high school. We know that these attitudes about marriage are largely being shaped by the media. I just had a daughter get married last year, and it was a very interesting journey to try to recall the good images of marriage in her life and not be swept away by TLC's, say yes to the dress and 4 weddings, as if the weddings should be in competition with one another and see who can throw the best party. The media really predominates our imagination with regard to weddings and what the marriages are about. And who then are the role models for this millennial generation? Is it the folks we read about in the National Tabular magazine or whatever you find next to your checkout register in the grocery store, for whom serial marriage has become a reality? To try to address some of that, we would like to try to integrate teaching and witness on the vocation of marriage within all formational settings. One of the things that the diocese will do, many of you have seen the confirmation DVD that was produced featuring the bishop last year. That will be part of a sacramental series, and there will be one on marriage eventually. We will review this religion curriculum and really suggest places to focus on marriage in a very intentional way so that it doesn't get left behind as something we take for granted. We will be developing a marriage readiness program for use on college campus ministries. And we will invite you as parishes to consider making it a point to invite married couples to visit as visiting speakers in different formational settings, to invite married couples to be catechists together, to invite married couples to serve as married couples in different ministries in your parish so that you might give witness to this marriage. We will invite you to highlight marriage during the confirmation process. One of the processes that the commission members looked at was a process called Chosen, which has quite a focus on marriage and on vocational choices within it. We ask you to think about how you are equipping parents to discuss sexuality and marriage and relationship with their children. We invite you to introduce NFP in a more intentional way and to integrate teaching about healthy relationships, marriage, and sexuality into youth ministry efforts. There are 3 workshops today that I would point out to you. One is by Dan Mulhall. It's the Parent-Parish Partnership. He is affiliated with the family life curriculum that we are using as a diocese, and I'm sure you're going to find what he brings very valuable. There is another on understanding marriage through the lens of the theology of the body by David Hadjuk, who is a professor up at Seton Hall. And also there is a presentation on Not Your Mom's NFP by Kate Mayer, who is a certified Creighton model instructor and the youth minister at St. Paul's in Princeton. So we hope those are going to be helpful to you, as you try to integrate teaching and witness on the vocation of marriage into all the formational settings, into the school, into religious ed, into RCIA, into marriage prep, baptismal prep, anything that you can think of. Be intentional about it. The third reality that I would call your attention to is this notion that there are strong marketing messages and powerful social realities that have become the primary drivers of decision-making about weddings and marriages. The bishop alluded to this notion of, I want to be married outdoors. This whole idea of destination weddings sort of hijacked our imagination. On top of that, there's this hyper-focus on individual happiness. And so even in the planning that goes into the preparation for marriage and the planning for the wedding, there's this notion that, what the church wants is just a bunch of hoops that don't have any reason, don't have any purpose, and they're not what I want, so they shouldn't be. This notion of individual happiness. The divorce rates that we hear about have actually had a restraining effect. There is a fear of failure among our millennial generation. They don't want to enter into marriages that will fail. A young couple marrying for the first time this year, according to sociologists, has a 40% risk of divorce. But the good news is that the divorce rate has been declining since 1980. But that tells you that many people are not entering into marriage for fear of that marriage not being lifelong, as the bishop was saying. The research shows that socioeconomic status matters. College debt has delayed marriage in many, many cases. Lower income folks are much less likely to marry. Immigration status also has an impact. When we consulted with the diocesan liaisons to the different ethnic communities, we heard a great story of foreign-born Catholics really struggling with the idea of marrying in the United States while they were apart physically from their family and the traditions of their homeland. We also heard about the struggle for undocumented immigrants who can't put together all the paperwork necessary to enter into marriage, and also the sad reality that some of our undocumented brothers and sisters have been in this country so long and cannot return home without the prospect of coming back, that a dual family situation has come up. We have many undocumented folks with a wife and family in a home country and then a de facto wife and family here in the United States. This is the pastoral reality in which we are trying to minister. There is, in fact, a marriage gap. You are more likely to marry if you have a high income and you are college educated, and you are least likely to marry if you have low income, low education, or you are a first-generation immigrant to this country. People are marrying later. The median age now is 28 years for men and 26 years for women. Just a generation ago or two, the median age was in the early 20s, and fewer people marry at all. There's about 53% right now of the Catholic adult population who are married. Back in the 1970s, that was nearer to 80%. So that's how much things have changed. Pope Francis has, as the bishop said, has really started to take this on, and his focus on this began during World Youth Day. Remember when he was in Brazil on the Copacabana beach and all of these places? He really focused on the young people at that time, and he said, I quote, "God calls each of us to be holy, to live his life, but he has a particular path for each one of us. Some are called to holiness through family life in the sacrament of marriage. But today, there are those that say that marriage is out of fashion. In a culture of relativism and the ephemeral, many preach the importance of enjoying the moment. They say that it is not worth making a lifelong commitment, making a definitive decision forever, because we do not know what tomorrow will bring. But in the Pope's words, he says, I ask you instead to be revolutionaries. I ask you to swim against the tide. Yes, I am asking you to rebel against this culture that ultimately believes you are incapable of responsibility, that believes you are incapable of true love. But I have confidence in you and I pray for you. Have the courage to swim against the tide." And so that's one of the things, with the encouragement of the Holy Father, we have to be able to bring that message to young people. And so one of the initiatives here, one of the actions within our plan is to do everything we can to influence the decision of Catholics to marry in the Church through the development and widespread dissemination of a compelling message about Catholic marriage. The diocese will be undertaking a campaign. We'll identify or produce some videos to assist in answering questions like why marry Catholic, who can marry, why are weddings celebrated in the Church. And we'll be compiling some best practices and responses to this trend of outdoor weddings and destination weddings so that you have some answers when people come to you that might help them to chew on this. I found San Francisco has been doing something like what we have been doing, and I found a great quote from Auxiliary Bishop Robert McElroy. It's very short. He says, "The key question is how to rebuild the relationship between young adults and the church so that sacramental marriage seems the logical and natural step for young couples who have fallen in love. There shouldn't be a big, powwow about, so where are we going to get married? We should have a relationship with our young adults so that it is the logical and natural step. So really any effort on the parish level that will engage young adults prior to marriage, after marriage, will help to make this a reality. There are 2 workshops today that I would point out to you. One is the Catholic Marriage FAQs with Monsignor Siriani. And the second is one called The Good News About Catholic Marriage, Changing the Course of the Conversation, with the Reverend Mr. Jim Grogan, who will be ordained in about a month, who has a great perspective on changing the course of the conversation. We know that millennial couples are very different from past generations. How many of you have young adults in your family? Yeah, quite a few. Their whole functional operating system is very different than perhaps my generation. We know, when I talk about the statistics, I often hear back from people, well, the generational cohorts are smaller. Okay, we know in the diocese that marriages in Catholic parishes have dropped 62% since 1990. 62%, that's a lot. And people say, well, but the boomer generation was big and Generation X was smaller. Well, that is true. But I have to tell you that the statisticians are telling us that the millennial generation is the largest generation since the baby boomers, and that it's still growing because of immigration. So this millennial generation that I'm talking about was born between 1982 and 2002. One of the things that we can know about them is the Pew research done recently has told us that never married millennials are more likely than their parents to say that church marriage is important. So lest the statistics roll over you and make you discouraged, there's this bright ray of sunshine here. There's this big generation that we're in the midst of right now, and they take marriage very seriously. A church marriage is important to them. But if we're going to engage them, we have to know more about them. And we know that there are real generational differences. A very small percentage of them attend Mass weekly. They are more diverse than any previous generation. What does that look like? It means their friend group doesn't look like them necessarily. They are more likely to have attended an Indian wedding, a Jewish wedding, a wedding in a park, a wedding on the beach in Cancun, than having attended a Catholic wedding anytime recently. In fact, their intended spouse may also be from a different cultural group or a different religious tradition than they are. They will marry at an older age. They will not be in their early 20s, most likely. They will be, on the whole, better educated than cohorts in the past, and they will have greater responsibilities in their jobs at the time that they prepare for marriage. They may already have children by this relationship or a previous relationship. And they have a distinctive learning style that is decidedly interactive. They are completely fluent in new technologies. We have a speaker today, Frank Mercadante, who really has specialized in knowing this group. His workshop is called The Spiritual Mindset of Millennials, Engaging the Next Generation. We hope you will check that out. So one of our steps forward has to be to improve the effectiveness of marriage preparation. If this generation is different from those that came before it, we cannot expect to prepare them for marriage in the same way we have been doing it for a long, long time. So the diocese will undertake some different initiatives to investigate the needs of young adults. The diocese will be establishing a diocesan marriage ministry training team. It will conduct some facilitator training workshops for pre-Cana couples. It will try to integrate a comprehensive catechetical segment that may be currently missing in marriage preparation process. And it will try to recruit and train bilingual focus facilitators. In terms of the parish recommendation, we are hoping that the parishes will look to incorporate mentoring somehow in the parish marriage preparation process. We know that that mentoring is one of the most effective things that we can do. There is a speaker today, Mary Rose Verrett, who will talk about using mentoring couples for marriage preparation and why that's so effective. And there's also a speaker, Tom Fertile, who will talk about 5 ways to better engage your audience. So if you're working with this millennial generation or even the generation that comes after it, it's very important that you learn how to be more interactive in your presentation style. We know that only one in 3 married Catholics are not validly married in the church. This is a huge prospect in terms of ministry. This is the proverbial low-hanging fruit, if that's what you're trying to look for in terms of your very first outreach. 1 in 3 Catholics marry civilly or in a religious ceremony outside of the Catholic communion. This research was done by Cara several years ago now, and I wouldn't be surprised if the number has increased since that time. Yet we know that of that group, only 1 in 20 will seek marriage convalidation. The opportunity to encounter Christ in the sacrament and to receive the outpouring of grace for living your marriage daily is a great gift that we could share with them. Many of them have no impediment, and they just need to be invited. It's also a sad reality in this diocese and other dioceses that some of our Catholics think they are validly married. We've had some issue with people choosing to marry at popular reception sites or outdoor ceremonies. They have a minister come who looks like a priest, maybe dressed like a priest, but seriously is not a Catholic priest in communion with his diocese. These disparities usually don't show up until the couple has been asked to be godparents for a baby or a confirmation sponsor. So again, we need a reality check here. We know statistically that about 1 in 4 Catholics, adult Catholics, are divorced. Some of them have remarried without an annulment and consequently have separated themselves from communion. But we need to remember and accept that there is a great deal of common ignorance out there about annulment. Only about 15% of divorced Catholics seek an annulment. About 49% of annulment petitions that are filed are granted. Now, certainly not every marriage that ends qualifies for an annulment, but we have to do better at getting the word out and correcting some of the misperceptions that are out there. So one of the initiatives of the plan is to restore, to regularize the situation of civilly married couples. And the diocese will be putting together some informational brochures. We'll work on customizing some convalidation materials that can be used in a whole variety of settings. Perhaps we'll produce some video clips of testimony of couples who have been through the convalidation process. We hope that you who are working in parishes will use the bulletin to create some awareness of convalidation and how to go about it. We hope you might think about holding information evenings in your parishes about convalidation. And one of the most effective strategies is to make an effort to determine the marital situation of parishioners at the time of registration, at the time of parishioners register for the parish or register children for religious ed or for the school, when they come forward for the baptism of a child, etc. And then to invite couples that are in irregular situations to discuss this process with the pastor or member of the pastoral team. One of the pastors who have been doing work in this area will offer a workshop today. Monsignor Rich Laverghetta will be offering a workshop on convalidation strategies, how to bring civil marriages into the church. We heard the bishop talk about how the commitment that's necessary for marriage, and marriage does require then the decision to love every day. It can be very hard work. We know from research that the risk of separation and divorce is highest within the first few years. This is also precisely the time we have the least contact with couples. The stressors on marriage also are well known. The top 10: money, parenting, infidelity, time, or lack thereof, conflict over household responsibilities, friends, irritating habits, family, expectations, and personality conflicts. My husband and I have been married for 30 years. We've been through a few of them ourselves. We know there's especially difficult circumstances with the separation of families during military service. We know that there are special needs when a family is caring for an ill or special needs child. And we also know that the emergence of the sandwich generation, those who are taking care of both children and elderly, have put special strains on marriage. We have opportunities here. We have opportunities to support couples in marriage. To that end, the plan is recommending that each parish establish a marriage ministry, essentially a core team that will provide some attentional support and enrichment for married couples. The parishes should invite together a core team, should implement some local set of support and marriage enrichment activities, and might include a kiosk or a display of materials in the vestibule, perhaps on their website, that will help families. In support of that, the diocese will be providing training for this group. They will also be reviving the Retrovi ministry, which hasn't seen a great deal of notoriety in the last couple of years, but does beautiful work. And there will be an effort to reestablish the marriage encounter program in Espanol, in Spanish. Again, workshops, staying connected to the newly married couples. Marie Ryan and Annie Hansberger will be doing that. There's Real Help for Troubled Marriages, Rich and Annette Colaswano and Tom and Pat Gallo. And Healing Wounded Relationships. Father Padavani, Martin Padavani, will be here today. So again, all kinds of different pieces. And the last realization is that a welcoming and supportive parish faith community can make a difference. As I said, my husband and I have been married for about 30 years now. I'm the child of divorced parents. And the reality is that my husband and I learned to live our marriage from the role models in our parish, from other married couples who showed us the way and encouraged us. It's a very important relationship, and we tend to underestimate it. We know that first impressions matter. And Peg will tell you the number of calls that she fields at the diocese because a couple intending to marry can't get through the parish secretary to someone she needs to talk to. First impressions matter. When I call the parish, I get lost in a maze a voicemail. Sometimes I just give up and send an email instead. First impressions matter. We tend to see as church a church that's stratified into age levels. We do this for kids, we do that for teenagers, we do this for, but we have to be thinking more in family groups, especially as our Hispanic brothers and sisters become a larger and larger component in every parish of our diocese. I've been doing some work in the Hispanic community in the last year, and so when you hold a youth ministry event and Spanish-speaking Catholics come, the whole family comes. The whole family comes. It's a very beautiful thing, but we have to change the way we think if we're going to be welcoming to that. There are real challenges in building community within large parishes. If you talk to people and ask them why they're no longer active in their parish, one of the things is that it's completely anonymous. Nobody misses me if I'm gone. They're yearning for that connection. So we have to do better that way. And I think that we lack intentionality, particularly in the area of marriage. When I was growing up, it was accepted that when you fell in love, you went to the church, you got married. That's not the sea we're swimming in anymore, folks. And so we have to be more intentional in terms of not taking things for granted. And so the final initiative then is to promote a marriage building culture in every aspect of parish life. And that really lives at the parish. The diocese can do some things to support that. One of the areas the commission highlighted was that gap between baptism and the engagement of young families when they enroll children in religious ed or school. But what happens in those 3 or 4 years when children are at their most impressionable and often young couples are at most risk for divorce? What are we doing? So the diocese will do some work in that area. But we're hoping that parishes will choose from among these best practices or any others that you know of, using the bulletin to post a weekly message, hold a monthly holy hour or adoration, and pray for marriage and family life. Hold some social gatherings with good activities for adolescents. Offer a public blessing for those who are engaged and have put a wedding on the books in your parish. Promote natural family planning at every opportunity. Hold a dinner dance, maybe a parish mini retreat for newly married couples. But also ensure that the parish staff is trained to provide a positive, informed response to questions about marriage, annulment, and convalidations. We want when the question is asked, we would like it to be answered. We would like it to be answered in a way that's inviting and draws people into relationship. More people are turned away by well-intentioned but not well-informed members of the parish staff. So the workshops today that'll be helpful in this area, in particular, Lori and Don Gramer are here to talk about becoming a marriage-building Catholic parish. And I think many of the workshops will also allude to this. So just to tie these 7 pieces up, it's very important that you understand that it will take mutually supportive and interdependent action. I want to go back to that image of the manufactured beam, the engineered beam, where there's layer upon layer upon layer, and those layers are what makes it strong. It's not any one thing. And those layers will need to happen by individuals and families. They'll need to happen in schools and parishes and other groups. They'll need to happen with the diocese, and they'll need to happen all together in some kind of consistent way. And so any work that you undertake is part of crafting that beam of support for marriages in the diocese. If we are successful at this, how will we know? This will be a 3-year implementation. We know, we hope, we plan that within 5 years we will see a change in the number of Catholics participating in pre-Cana. We're looking for over a 20% increase in the number of marriages in the diocese. we're looking for a 25% increase in the number of convalidations in the diocese. In reality, that should be easy. There are only about 300 convalidations in the diocese in a given year. A 25% increase is 375. If we put our minds to it, we could do that next year. Not only these quantifiable things, but lots of other things we will see. If we can be intentional about this, I believe that we will start to see things like couples serving together in parish ministry, things like a greater variety of marriage enrichment programs being offered at the parish level, the reality of young adults inquiring about marriage in our parishes. You know, the average parish celebrates less than one marriage a month currently. Parishes and parish relationships that support couples in parenting, troubled marriages, caring for special needs members, caring for the sick or the elderly. I think if every parish can commit to do one thing in these 7 steps, we would see these visible signs begin to emerge. And you can imagine what might happen after that. You heard about the work of the USCCB. I would just align that with last year's extraordinary synod on the family in the context of evangelization, with the World Meeting of Families that's coming up in September and the visit of the Holy Father, with the synod on the family that will follow that in October. Line all of those things up with this conversation, and I would ask you, which layers of the action plan can you address this year in your school, in your parish? Which strategies for success will you use? Are you willing to be part of the supportive work that will be done at the diocesan level? I believe that today is the day. I believe that after 3 years of preparation, that now is the acceptable time, and we can build this beam of support for strengthening marriages in the diocese. So I would just like to leave you with this quote from the Holy Father. He says that today society is confronted with fewer marriages. In many countries, separation of couples is increasing while the number of children is decreasing. These broken marriage bonds affect the young most of all, as they come to view marriage as something temporary. Perhaps there is a fear of failure, which prevents men and women from trusting in Christ's promise of grace in marriage and in the family. And yet, in truth, we know that most every man and woman desires a secure and lasting relationship, a stable marriage, and a happy family. And so the most effective witness to the blessings of marriage is the good life of Christian spouses and their families. This was the message of the Holy Father just 2 weeks ago. And so the challenge today is, how are we going to build up that effective witness here in the Diocese of Trenton? Thank you for listening. I look forward to working with you.